Have you ever wondered what really happens when you cry for someone who has died? Not metaphorically, literally. What do they see? What do they feel? Do they hear your sobs in the dark, feel your heart breaking across dimensions, or sense the way your soul trembles when their name escapes your lips? Most people believe the dead are gone. Some believe they watch silently, like stars that no longer burn but still shine. But Edgar Cayce said something very different. He revealed that your tears don't just vanish into the pillow. They reach, they vibrate, and the ones you grieve can feel them as clearly as a hand brushing against their spirit. According to Cayce, our emotions don't stay in our bodies, they radiate. When you're in deep grief, when your tears fall from that sacred space between memory and longing, you emit waves of energy, not invisible, not imaginary, but real. Real enough that they shine in the spiritual realm. Real enough that the soul you miss can see them, like ripples in a still lake, but made of light. You think your grief is private, but in the spirit world your sorrow is like a beacon, a signal fire, a flare rising through layers of silence, and they see you, but not the way you think. Spirits don't have eyes like ours. They perceive through resonance, color, vibration. Your sadness takes shape in the higher dimensions. It has texture, frequency, even color. A wave of blue-gray sorrow rising from your chest. A crimson pulse when grief twists into anger. A gold shimmer when your tears come from a place of deep, sacred remembrance. To them, emotion is visible. And, when it's pure, when it comes from a place of love, it draws them close. Not to haunt, not to linger, but to witness. To wrap themselves around the aching air of your moment, to sit beside you in that invisible space between breath and sob, to say, "I'm still here." You might not feel it. You might only sense a chill, a dream, a shadow moving gently at the edge of your awareness. But Cayce said, when we cry for the dead, they come. Not always with words, sometimes just with presence. Silence, stillness, like a memory that suddenly feels more alive than it should. But here's the truth that few understand. Your grief, while seen, while heard, can become a weight. If it becomes too heavy, if you cannot let go of the pain, it can pull them back. It can hold them near the earth, between worlds, caught in a place where neither of you are free. That's not what you want. That's not what they want either. They don't want you to forget. They want you to remember with peace. Because grief can be both a gift and a chain. Cayce spoke of earthbound souls. Not damned, not evil, just lost. Not because of what they did, but because of what we couldn't release. Our sorrow becomes an anchor. Our refusal to heal becomes their delay. Imagine wanting to fly, but being tethered by love so heavy it becomes sorrow. This isn't your fault. It's your humanity. You loved deeply, you still do. But when your love becomes light instead of pain, they feel it too. It lifts them. Every time you look at the sky and say, "Thank you for loving me," they rise. Every time you laugh at a memory instead of shattering under it, they glow. Every time you light a candle, not out of despair, but out of reverence, the flame touches them. Grief, when purified through gratitude, becomes sacred fuel. It creates bridges of light. Cayce said our souls are like threads woven through eternity, never cut, only stretched. And the emotions we send across those threads, they matter. Your sorrow isn't just yours. It becomes part of the spiritual journey of the one you lost. They are not watching you suffer as punishment. They feel your pain because your energies are still entwined. Your heartbreak echoes because the connection is real. And when the time comes to release, it's not abandonment, it's a gift. It tells them, I carry you not as a wound, but as a blessing. And they, in their dimension of light and silence, smile. Because they know they are not forgotten. And that's all any soul wants. To be remembered without being held back, to be loved without being chained, to feel your tears as a song, not a prison, to rise with your love behind them, not your pain wrapped around them. Have you ever wondered what really happens when you cry for someone who has died? Not metaphorically, literally. What do they see? What do they feel? Do they hear your sobs in the dark, feel your heart breaking across dimensions, or sense the way your soul trembles when their name escapes your lips? Most people believe the dead are gone. Some believe they watch silently, like stars that no longer burn but still shine. But Edgar Cayce said something very different. He revealed that your tears don't just vanish into the pillow. They reach, they vibrate, and the ones you grieve can feel them as clearly as a hand brushing against their spirit. According to Cayce, our emotions don't stay in our bodies, they radiate. When you're in deep grief, when your tears fall from that sacred space between memory and longing, you emit waves of energy, not invisible, not imaginary, but real. Real enough that they shine in the spiritual realm, real enough that the soul you miss can see them, like ripples in a still lake, but made of light. You think your grief is private, but in the spirit world, your sorrow is like a beacon, a signal fire, a flare rising through layers of silence. They see you, but not the way you think. Spirits don't have eyes like ours. They perceive through resonance, color, vibration. Your sadness takes shape in the higher dimensions. It has texture, frequency, even color. A wave of blue-gray sorrow rising from your chest. A crimson pulse when grief twists into anger. A gold shimmer when your tears come from a place of deep, sacred remembrance. To them, emotion is visible, and when it's pure, when it comes from a place of love, it draws them close, not to haunt, not to linger, but to witness, to wrap themselves around the aching air of your moment, to sit beside you in that invisible space between breath and sob, to say, I'm still here. You might not feel it. You might only sense a chill, a dream, a shadow moving gently at the edge of your awareness. But Cayce said, when we cry for the dead, they come. Not always with words. Sometimes just with presence. Silence. Stillness. Like a memory that suddenly feels more alive than it should. But here's the truth that few understand. Your grief, while seen, while heard, can become a weight. If it becomes too heavy, if you cannot let go of the pain, it can pull them back. It can hold them near the earth, between worlds, caught in a place where neither of you are free. That's not what you want. That's not what they want either. They don't want you to forget. They want you to remember with peace, because grief can be both a gift and a chain. Cayce spoke of earthbound souls, not damned, not evil, just lost, not because of what they did, but because of what we couldn't release. Our sorrow becomes an anchor. Our refusal to heal becomes their delay. Imagine wanting to fly, but being tethered by love so heavy it becomes sorrow. This isn't your fault. It's your humanity. You loved deeply, you still do. But when your love becomes light instead of pain, they feel it too. It lifts them. Every time you look at the sky and say, thank you for loving me, they rise. Every time you laugh at a memory instead of shattering under it, they glow. Every time you light a candle, not out of despair but out of reverence, the flame touches them. Grief, when purified through gratitude, becomes sacred fuel. It creates bridges of light. Cayce said our souls are like threads woven through eternity, never cut, only stretched. And the emotions we send across those threads, they matter. Your sorrow isn't just yours. It becomes part of the spiritual journey of the one you lost. They are not watching you suffer as punishment. They feel your pain because your energies are still entwined. Your heartbreak echoes because the connection is real. And when the time comes to release, it's not abandonment, it's a gift. It tells them, I carry you not as a wound, but as a blessing. And they, in their dimension of light and silence, smile, because they know they are not forgotten. And that's all any soul wants. To be remembered without being held back, to be loved without being chained, to feel your tears as a song, not a prison. To rise with your love behind them, not your pain wrapped around them. Your grief is not invisible. You may cry in darkness, you may think no one sees, but Casey said otherwise. In the realms beyond death, sorrow has shape, emotion has color, grief moves like energy, radiant, pulsing, undeniable. To the dead, your tears are not water, they are vibration, light, resonance. Every sob, every whisper, every silent ache that shudders through your chest leaves a mark in the spiritual dimension, not a scar, a signal. Casey described this in ways that sound poetic, but he meant them literally. He said that when the living grieve, the emotion is emitted as a frequency. The soul on the other side doesn't hear your voice or see your face in the way you imagine. It doesn't need to. It feels your energy directly, and that energy glows. To the soul that's past, your grief looks like color, gray, pure, deep and soft when your pain is quiet, a darker storm cloud violet when your sorrow becomes despair, golden white when your grief begins to transform into love, memory, gratitude. Your feelings paint the space between you. It's not metaphor, it's communication. Because the soul doesn't observe with eyes. It resonates, it attunes. When you call out, when your heart breaks open with longing or regret, the soul connected to you can feel it, like a string being plucked across time. They may not come as a voice, they may not speak back in words, but they draw near, and in drawing near they feel your grief like weather, the intensity of it, the weight, the temperature of your emotion pressing into their energetic field. They know when you're crying. Not because they're watching like some distant guardian, but because they are linked to you. Through love, through memory, through the subtle chords that don't break at death. It's like singing into a canyon and feeling the canyon sing back. When you cry for them, they come close enough to feel your presence and not just feel it, absorb it. Casey taught that our tears can be nourishing or numbing to the soul we grieve. When your grief is gentle, remembering love, it feeds them. When your grief is trapped in bitterness or guilt, it can confuse them, keep them lingering near the veil, not fully moving on, unsure if they're supposed to comfort or wait or return. You may think your pain is yours alone, but the spirit world doesn't work that way. Emotions echo. And Casey insisted that even after death, the soul is learning, growing, becoming, just as you are. And what you feel affects their journey, just as what they've become affects yours. The connection doesn't die, it changes form. That's why it matters what energy you hold when you think of them. Are you holding on to loss, or are you sending light? Are you drowning in what was taken, or are you honoring what was shared? Your tears are messengers. They don't just fall, they rise. They rise into realms where they are seen, where they are felt, where they are answered. Not always with a sign you can touch, but with a shift in energy, a dream, a memory that suddenly blooms inside your chest for no reason. That's them. That's the subtle reply from the other side. They saw you, they felt you, they heard the language behind your silence. And if your tears came from love, they glow brighter than any candle. Casey said we must learn to weep without clinging, to mourn without binding, because the dead don't need you to forget them. They need you to remember them clearly and freely. They don't need your suffering, they need your truth. And the truth is, they are still near, not because you cry, but because you loved. The tears are just the echo of that love rising like light through the dark, and they see every single one. Or you might think that death cuts the cord, that when someone dies, the connection you shared is severed like a rope set on fire, snapping under the weight of finality. But that isn't true. Not in the world of spirit, not in the language of souls. According to Casey, love doesn't die. It stretches, like a silver thread, spun from the very breath of creation. It extends across dimensions, through veils, across time, between hearts that no longer beat in rhythm, and yet still sing the same silent song. The moment you love someone, truly love them, a bond forms that outlasts the body. That thread doesn't vanish when breath stops. It just becomes quieter, finer, more sensitive. And in grief, that thread trembles. Your sorrow sends pulses through it, not just feelings, but frequency, longing, ache, desperation, regret, sometimes even guilt. All of it moves through the thread, and the soul on the other side feels it. You are not as alone as you think. When you sit in silence and hold their picture, when you break down while folding the shirt they used to wear, when you hear that song and suddenly you're gasping like the air forgot how to enter your lungs, the thread stirs, and their soul, wherever it has gone, turns back, not in judgment, not in fear, but because it feels the weight of your love. The grief and the love are not separate. They're twins, one born from presence, the other from absence, both sacred, both powerful. But here is where the sacred becomes delicate. That same thread that allows you to reach across realms, it can also hold them back. Casey warned us of this. He said that when grief becomes too heavy, when love turns to possession, or despair crystallizes into need, that thread becomes less of a bridge and more of a tether. Souls that are meant to move forward, to rest, to begin new journeys, may find themselves lingering, hovering, staying too close to the material world, not out of punishment but because of unfinished emotion, because the weight of our sorrow roots them near. You don't do this on purpose. Of course you don't. You love them. You just want one more day, one more laugh, one more minute to say the thing you never said. But sometimes, in holding on, we pull them downward. We ask them to stay when their soul is meant to soar, and they do stay because love is loyal, because they hear you, because they remember who you are and who they were and everything you shared. But eventually they begin to dim. Not in essence. The soul is eternal, but in direction. They can forget where they're supposed to go if the echoes of this world are louder than the song of the next. Casey said that overwhelming sorrow creates static in the spiritual field. It makes it harder for the soul to hear the next calling. It wraps them in your heartbreak. It clouds the light. This is not punishment. This is simply energy responding to energy. You pull, they feel pulled. You cry out, they pause. You collapse in grief, they turn back. Not always, not forever, but often enough that it matters. This is why healing your grief is not betrayal. It is release. It is love, matured. Love that says, I miss you so much it hurts, but I would never hold you back. And when you do that, when you let the tears fall without clinging, when you speak their name with a smile instead of a scream, when you breathe deeply and tell the sky I love you and I hope you're free, the thread glows. It shifts from a tether into a bridge of light. It becomes the thing that doesn't trap them but guides them. They walk forward into whatever comes next, carrying your love as a lantern, not a chain. They still feel you, they still remember, but now you're helping them become, not just waiting, not just aching. You are part of their evolution, even after death. That's how deep the thread goes. Across dimensions, across silence, across every realm the soul must travel. They don't lose you. They carry you just as you carry them. So cry, yes, grieve, speak to the air and hope they hear. But let the thread shimmer with peace, not weight. Let it stretch, not bind. Because true love does not grip. True love lets go, and glows even brighter as it does. Some spirits don't leave right away, not because they're punished, not because they're banished, but because something holds them, something soft, something human, something magnetic. Casey called them Earthbound. Not ghosts in the way horror stories described, but souls caught in the in-between, not fully here, not fully gone, hovering in a space just beyond the physical, pulled close by emotion that never finished expressing itself. And more often than not, it isn't their emotion doing the holding. It's yours, your sorrow, your longing, your inability to let go, not because you don't love them, but because you do, so deeply, so desperately that you can't imagine life without them. But when love becomes an anchor, it can delay their journey, and that's not something you're ever taught. It's said that when people die, the soul leaves the body, but not always the earth. Some stay near because they're confused, some because they're frightened, some because they believe they're needed or that something is unfinished, and some because the living won't let them go. It's subtle. It's not a haunting. It's not some malicious spectre lurking in the shadows. It's a presence, a weight in the room, a feeling you get when you're alone but not alone, a flicker in the mirror, a dream you can't quite explain. They're still there, not because they want to be trapped, but because they feel your pain and they don't want to abandon you in it. Imagine a mother who dies suddenly and hears her child's sobs every night. Would she leave, or would she linger, hoping to comfort, even if her presence is never fully known? Imagine a spouse taken too soon, watching their partner spiral into depression. Could they walk away from that? The dead don't cling to life out of ego. They do it out of love, out of fear, out of confusion, and often out of the unresolved emotions we're still radiating. Casey described these spirits as being wrapped in layers of energy: grief, guilt, resentment, fear. These aren't just feelings. In the spirit world, they're textures, they're forms. They shape what a soul can move through and what it can't. So when you grieve without direction, when the pain consumes you and never evolves, it creates a fog, a spiritual static, a magnetic loop. And they stay, not fully themselves, not fully free. They hover in places where love once bloomed, where laughter once echoed, where memories still glow in pictures and in the dusty clothes no one has yet touched. It is not punishment, but it is stagnation. And it isn't just hurting you, it's holding them. That's why closure matters. Not the kind you get from answers, not the kind that comes with knowing every detail of how or why they passed. Closure, in this deeper sense, means acceptance, a sacred exhale, a permission that says, you are free, and so am I. It doesn't mean you stop loving them. It doesn't mean you erase their memory. It means you allow them to go where they need to go, without being caught in the gravity of your sorrow. Casey was clear. Death is not the end, but what follows is shaped by how both worlds respond to it. When we mourn with resistance, the transition is turbulent. When we mourn with openness, the path becomes clear. There is a difference between love that binds and love that frees. Bound love says, don't leave me, I need you. I can't survive without you. Freeing love says, I miss you with everything in me, but I want you to grow, even if I can't see it. One is a plea, the other is a prayer, and when you shift from pleading to praying, everything changes. The soul that lingers begins to rise. It doesn't forget you. It doesn't vanish. It simply steps into the next part of its journey, carrying your blessing instead of your pain. And that is the most powerful thing you can offer. Your grief transformed into love. Your ache turned into light. Your heartbreak surrendered into trust. Because in that moment you're not just letting them go. You're setting both of you free. There is a secret doorway hidden inside grief. It doesn't appear at first. In the beginning, everything is gray. The world is dimmed by loss, and every memory feels like both a gift and a wound. But slowly, through the ache, something else begins to glow. Not to erase the pain, but to rise through it. Gratitude. Casey taught that gratitude isn't just an emotion. It's a frequency, a light, a bridge. And when it rises through sorrow, it creates a kind of spiritual alchemy. It lifts both the living and the dead into higher realms. When you remember someone not just with tears but with thankfulness, something extraordinary happens. You create light, not metaphorically, but energetically. In the spiritual planes, your emotions become visible. And gratitude, Casey said, is one of the brightest forces that can radiate from the human soul. The moment you say thank you, not just with words, but from the deepest part of your being, that energy ripples through the invisible thread between you and the one you lost. It touches them, warms them, it becomes nourishment for their soul as they continue their journey. You may feel powerless in grief, but the truth is, you're never without power. Your memory, shaped by gratitude instead of anguish, becomes a lantern in the dark. Casey gave readings where departed spirits returned to the living, not to haunt, but to bless. And in those moments it wasn't despair that called them, it was joy. It was remembrance. It was the radiant peace of someone who could say, I miss you, and I'm so grateful you were in my life. One reading described a woman who had lost her son in a tragic accident. For years she mourned him with such heaviness that her dreams became filled with shadows, blurred images, unspoken words, a lingering sense of sorrow that would not lift. But when she began to shift her prayers from why to thank you, everything changed. The dreams softened, light began to appear. Her son no longer seemed confused or distant. He stood calmly in the light, and though he didn't speak, she felt the message rise inside her like a breath. Thank you. I can go now. That's the power of gratitude. It transforms mourning into medicine. When you light a candle not out of desperation but reverence, the flame becomes a signal, not a cry for help, but a beacon of peace. When you walk past their photo and whisper, I love you, with a smile instead of a sob, you send light, not longing. When you cook their favorite meal not to feel their absence, but to celebrate their memory, the scent becomes a sacred offering. You may think these moments are small, but in the soul's journey, they shine like stars, because your memory of them matters, and how you remember them matters even more. Gratitude doesn't mean forgetting the pain. It doesn't mean pretending it didn't happen. It means honoring the gift beneath the grief. It means saying, I carry you in my heart not as a weight, but as warmth. And that warmth, they feel it, they recognize it, they rise in it. Casey said, souls are drawn toward light, toward energy that uplifts, not energy that entangles. Gratitude is the path that opens the way. The difference between a soul staying near in sorrow and a soul returning in joy. When you say thank you for loving me, they feel more free. When you whisper, I hope you're at peace, they take another step forward. When you smile through tears and say, you made my life better, their path lights up beneath them. That's the mystery Casey tried to share. Grief is sacred, but gratitude is transcendent, because in the end your tears were always a form of love. And when love ripens into thankfulness, even in the presence of loss, it becomes a healing force that echoes through eternity. So speak their name with reverence, remember their laugh, tell their story, and let your heart say thank you, not just for what you lost, but for what you had. That light will find them, and they will know they were loved, not only in life, but in remembrance. You may not see it, but your emotions have color, not just metaphorically, spiritually, energetically. Casey described the soul's vision as something radically different from our own, not based in light reflected by surfaces, but in light emitted by energy. And the most radiant energy of all is feeling. In the spiritual realm, emotions don't hide behind words. They reveal themselves as frequency, as form, as color. The moment you feel, your soul lights up, and that light is visible to those who've crossed over. They see you, not as skin or silhouette, but as waves. When you're angry, it pulses as red, hot, jagged like embers being thrown. When you're lost in sorrow, your aura turns a muted grey-blue, heavy and low like a storm cloud about to break. Love appears as gold, white, radiant, alive, full of movement. And peace shimmers violet, cool, expansive, like still water touched by morning sun. This is how the dead recognize us, not through faces, through frequencies. They don't hear the words you speak. They feel the energy behind them. You might say, "I miss you," and on the other side, they don't hear syllables. They feel the ache in your chest, the longing in your breath, the golden thread of love trying to rise through sorrow. They understand not what you say, but what you mean. It's the emotional body that speaks across realms. Casey said that our emotional clarity is like tuning an instrument. If your feelings are tangled, rage mixed with grief, guilt mixed with desire, the music gets distorted. The soul you're calling to hears the noise, but not the message. But when you sit in stillness and let your emotion find its true name, when you allow grief to settle or let love rise through it, that clarity becomes a bridge, a direct signal. You might not hear their answer, but you'll feel the change. A weight lifted, a silence deepened, a sudden moment of warmth, like light passing over your skin with no source. That is how they reply, through sensation, through subtle shifts in the invisible field between you. And your emotional tone is what invites that reply. IT emphasized that the spirit world is not a realm of deception, it's a realm of transparency. What you feel, you become. What you radiate, you reveal. You cannot hide there. Not from them, not from yourself. So if you want connection, speak with truth. Not performative grief, not performative peace, but real, honest feeling, purified through presence. Your emotional body is the language of the soul, and when you tend to it, when you let it sing its true note, the dead come closer, not because they are trapped, but because they are drawn to your clarity like stars drawn to gravity. They recognize you, they remember, and if they feel that gold-white light, the pure essence of love, they rise, they glow, they heal. You might not know how to let go. That's okay. You don't need to release them all at once. You just need to hold them in light more often than in shadow. Kelsey once described a grieving father whose pain was so sharp, so tangled in guilt and fury, that his son's soul remained suspended, confused, restless. Not because the father meant harm, but because the emotional signal he sent was fire, not light. Only when that grief was softened with forgiveness, toward himself, toward fate, toward life, did the color shift. The frequency changed, and the soul moved forward. You can't control the whole process. You're not meant to. But you can choose the emotional signature you send. Let your love be radiant, not desperate. Let your memory be alive, not frozen. Let your feelings speak, not from fear, but from truth. Because they see you, not your face, not your hands, but the color of your soul, shaped by what you feel. And when that color is clear, when it is loving, when it is peaceful, it becomes a language more powerful than words. It becomes home. There's a reason they visit you in dreams. It's not random. It's not fantasy. It's the only place where the soul can speak without the interference of the mind. Casey taught that dreams are not illusions, they are intersections, bridges between the material and the immaterial. In our sleep, we leave behind the constraints of logic, ego, and identity, and step into the realm where spirit lives. And it's there, in that subtle space, that your loved ones reach for you. Especially when your heart is full, especially when you've cried in silence and no one else was there to see it. Because the soul doesn't need daylight to recognize longing. It listens in the dark, and when your grief reaches a certain depth, not just sadness, but that aching, open vulnerability, it sends a signal through the thread, and they come. Not always with faces, not always with voices, but they arrive. Sometimes as light, sometimes as warmth, sometimes as a presence you can't describe, but instantly recognize. They walk through the dream not to haunt, but to hold, not to explain, but to remind, and often it's in those moments when you wake in tears but feel peace in your chest. That's them, That's their message, arriving in a form your waking mind would dismiss, but your soul immediately understands. Cassie explained that these visitations happen when your emotional energy opens the veil. Your deep feelings, raw, honest, unguarded, act like a doorway, not forced open but gently parted, and they step through. Sometimes it's a simple image, their hand brushing yours, a look exchanged, a quiet room where no words are needed. Other times it's a symbol, a bird landing on your shoulder, a song playing in the background, a place you've never seen but somehow remember. These aren't just fragments of memory, they're spiritual metaphors, because the soul speaks in symbols, in archetypes, in resonance, and when you wake from these dreams you carry something with you, a shift, a knowing, not an answer, but a sense that something real has touched you, that love has crossed over again, just for a moment, just long enough to whisper, "I'm here." Sometimes the visit doesn't come in sleep. Sometimes it slips into waking life, in the form of synchronicity, the time on the clock that always meant something to you both, the sudden appearance of a feather or coin, the scent of their perfume passing in a breeze with no source, the inexplicable peace that settles into your chest just as you were about to cry. These are not coincidences. Casey described them as soul echoes, moments when the energy of the departed aligns with your vibration just long enough to create a ripple, a sign, a shimmer in the veil. You might call it intuition, you might doubt it later, but in the moment, you know. Because the heart doesn't lie. You know when it's real, you know when it's them, and that knowing is a visitation in itself. But there's something you should remember. They don't come because you beg. They come when your soul opens, not when you plead from desperation, but when you soften into presence. That's what allows the contact, not control, but surrender. Because the dead don't need to be summoned. They respond to truth, to emotion, to the vibration of love, remembering love. So when you lie in bed and whisper into the silence, "I miss you," they hear the frequency behind it, and if it's clear, they come, if not in a dream, then in a symbol, if not in a sign, then in a sudden stillness. They come not to change your life, but to remind you that life never ends, that love never ends, that even now, after all this time, something of them is still reaching for you, and in the dream space or in the quiet between your thoughts, you meet again, not as you were, but as you always are. Two souls, separated by breath, but not by being, connected by something deeper than time. And every time you dream of them, feel them, sense them, trust that something real has happened. They see when you cry, not with eyes, but with essence. They see the longing in your heart, and they respond in the only way they can, not with answers, but with presence. And that presence is the most beautiful thing they have to give. You've been told they're gone, that death means disconnection, that the ones you love have disappeared into some unreachable elsewhere. But Casey said something different, something astonishing in its simplicity. There is no death, only transition. Not an end, not a vanishing, just a shift, a movement from one state of being to another, like water becoming vapor, not destroyed, just unseen. And once you understand that, you begin to feel them again, not in the ways you used to, not through touch or voice, but in the quiet, in the in-between, in the moments when the veil thins and something inside you whispers, "They're here," because they are. Casey's readings described the dead as not far away but merely vibrating at a higher frequency, just beyond ordinary sight, not bound by time, not anchored by space, free to move through our lives like wind through trees, felt, though not always seen. And where do they go? To the places that mattered most. To you. To the moments that echo with memory and meaning. They attend the milestones, not as shadows, but as soul light. The wedding where you leave an empty chair. the funeral where their favorite song plays, the birth of a child they never met in life but somehow already love, the anniversary where you light a candle and speak their name into the silence. They're there, you might not feel it every time, but some part of you knows. The chill that passes over your arm, the sudden wave of calm when you needed it most, the flicker of light in the corner of your eye that disappears the second you look. These are not your imagination. They are presence, pure and subtle, the soul's way of saying, I'm still walking with you. Because love doesn't vanish with breath. It lingers. It deepens. It becomes something holy. And even though you can't touch them, they touch your life. Gently, quietly, without fanfare. They show up when you speak to them out loud in an empty room, when you cry at their grave but leave a flower anyway, when you carry on a tradition they started, when you become the kind of person they believed you could be, and they see it. They celebrate with you. They grieve with you. They protect you, not always from harm, but from forgetting who you are. And in your most vulnerable moments, when it feels like no one could possibly understand the depth of your ache, their presence grows strongest. Because they know, they feel, they remember. There is no myth more damaging than gone forever. No lie more painful than you're alone. Because you're not. You never have been. The room is not empty. The sky is not silent. The moments you think you face alone are shared. Casey spoke of souls that linger not to haunt, but to help. Guides, guardians, loved ones transformed into whispering hands that guide you, nudge you, lift you just enough so you can take the next breath. And you don't have to prove it to anyone. You just have to trust the feeling. Because connection doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it waits, quietly, lovingly, until your heart is soft enough to feel. They are with you in the hospital room, in the courtroom, in the long drive home where you question everything. They are with you when you light the candle, when you write the letter you'll never send, when you stand by the ocean and say their name to the waves. They are not watching from afar. They are beside you. Always. Because death is not disconnection, it is a doorway, and love walks through it